Hey everyone, this is the second game in playing with my new army, a Beastmen Herds army that I styled around multiple small units of combat troops. So in the army book listing, you've got the ability to take one off Dragon Ogres and one off Razor Gore Herds, which I think are some of the most efficient units going around. It hasn't been received in the most popular way. I don't think people like to play against this sort of army. But John, who was playing Dark Elves tonight, was gracious enough of an opponent, putting up with these sorts of antics, and ran his own we ran a dragon in a 1750 point game to prepare for the warm up and Old Hammer 3 tournaments that are coming up for us in Sydney over the next month or so. So from the top, this was our deployment. We're playing the mountain pass scenario, which means we're deploying closer to one another. I have I'm running 3 wizards. So I've got a level 3 who has Hag Tree, Elementalism, Ruby Ring, and managed to roll Windblast and in this game. And I think Travel Mystical Pathway. Can't remember what. I guess the other spell regress to Vile type. I'm also running a level in this instance, a level 2. Then got Vile Tide and something else that I didn't use a lot of. And then I was running a level 1 here with Skin of Man, and he has Vile Tide too. So the aim here is just to sort of look at, well, Vile Tide is one of the best spells in the game. What happens if I go all in on it in a competitive way? Beyond that, I've got a gigantic spawn of Nurgle. I have 6 Razor Gore herds, which you can see in a line, and one of them is behind this forest to sort of prevent any sort of scouting shenanigans. And I also have, I think, 3 Dragon Ogre Shartak, or 3 Shartaks, and a Shaggoth. And the Shaggoth is running the Great Weapon, Black and Plate setup. So has a 2+ armor save essentially. But at this level, that's all you can get into rare with the gigantic spawn of Nurgle. So that's sort of my army. Just run through, send it, try to back them up with Viletide. John's army at the top, he's got Dark Riders at the top and the bottom in skirmish. You can see 9 Cold Ones, Banner of Haganeth, a dragon, Lord on a dragon, Dreadlord, is only able to afford full plate armor, lance, shield. On top of that, has a unit of shades up the front, and he has a big unit of witch elves next to a cauldron, and the cauldron has a death hag that has the ogre blade on top of it. There's also a level 2 sorceress here gaining cover from the Dark Riders, and that's something I think John played particularly well, and we'll look at in the tactics video for this, how he managed to optimize that level 2 wizard, even though I sort of dominated magic in this game. So that's how it started. John won the role to go first, and just moved his units forward. On my turn, I rolled a miscast with my level 2, and rolled a double 1 on the miscast table as well. So I took that big strength 10 hit. It used to be so much worse. One of the ridiculous things about characters riding chariots is just adding the wounds. I mean, there's something that I think has across the board been undercosted, but I took 1 big wound, and that was it for the miscast. On the right, you can see how I've moved up to counter his first turn. So I've gone straight past the arc, been very careful to keep everything out of charge range of the dragon. But you can see on the right flank that I've moved everything into position to make some charges on the next turn. John then wheels his dragon enormously, and you can see this threat of then being able to run a whole bunch of charges on the next turn. He's moved his Cold Ones that way too. His Dark Riders on both flanks have moved backwards. So everything's wheeling towards this massive troops over here, but the Spawn, who is out of sight, and the Wizard out of sight have been able to they're going to be able to move forward next turn. I had 3 units of 5 Gores, I should have said at the start, with True Horns. They all came on at the start of turn 2. So I had 3 units of 5. One of them over here has 6, just to make the points count work properly, come on as ambushes. So I'm going to try to zone him out here and just push these Dark Riders back. They're in skirmish formation, as much as it looks like something different at the moment. You can imagine on the side of the hill, trying to get that down. So I'm trying to just make sure that I'm going to be able to charge them at some point. If I charge 1 off units, they're going to escape from me. Where happens next is I maneuver into position. I declare a whole raft of charges at the front. Some of them make it, some of them don't. And then I bring things like on the left flank, bring things back towards this now exposed right flank for John's Dark Elves. I do get in with both the Shaggoth and a Dragon Ogre into the Witch Elves. This Razor Gore on the right doesn't make it. And this one is moved specifically to block the dragon. You can see that we've put down the charge arc template. That's for me to make sure I keep everything else out of that line so they can't charge my sorcerers on chariot. What ends up happening, like from an up view, you can see here, that's probably better how I've positioned to not get attacked by the dragon, but it's pretty ominous looking from the back with these ambushes sitting around behind the scenes and all these other units sort of encircling the Dark Elves already, even though they're not going to be as great as fighters. You can see they've taken some wounds from shooting and magic on the way in as well. So what ends up happening there is that I'm able to, just to take this shot, I'm able to shoot, I should go back, I'm able to launch 2 Vile Tides into the dragon. So his sorceress around here taking cover behind the unit of cold ones couldn't get into the range to dispel these Vile Tides. The first Vile Tide on the Hag Tree reroll, I rolled only 1/6, but then Hag Tree, I got 4 wounds off the dragon. And then the second one, I rolled an enormous amount of hits from the level 2, I think 26 hits, and got 4 wounds there. So I left that little one you can see next to the dragon. It's taken 8 wounds from Vile Tide. Very impressive spell. I tried to bring my guy out here to cast it. And what we'll talk about in the tactics is how John cleverly was able to protect this sorcerer from being hit by Vile Tide here because of the rules around single characters and same unit type. So yeah, going into the next turn, what happens at the top? I've been able to push back these Witch Elves. They go back into single file after I win combat by a fair enough, but they fall back in good order, and then they fall back into the single line. I was pretty impressed with Witch Elves in this game. I mean, I don't have any shooting, so that might factor into them being a bit better than they were, but they will put in a lot of attacks soon and start to poison some of my models as well. So I was at these cold ones here, had the opportunity to do a really big charge. We've talked sometimes on this channel of the wheeling rules being really difficult, that charges shouldn't fail because of the wheel, but you can see that if it charged straight ahead, it wouldn't be a legal charge. So to make this big wheel, I think you needed 16 or 15 and ended up rolling 14 or something lower and failed. The cold ones failed that charge onto the spawn. So the dragon had then charged a Razor Gore. I think I took it because I didn't want him to have the opportunity to redirect, and the Razor Gore was ripped apart by the dragon very easily, but it left him out of combat, which is critical for playing as dragons. And even if it wants to restrain and reform here, which I feel like, I'm not sure whether John failed that test or not, or took it, but it left it exposed, which is the most important thing for how the narrative of this battle plays out. So moving on, what happens next is on my next turn with 1 wound left, I am able to take the dragon down with the Vile Tides. I think the first one gets it pretty easily. And I just, came away very impressed with this spell overall and what it's able to do against particular targets. You can see that I've got my Razor Gore herd in here, the spawn and the Razor Gore attack the cold one, and this combat behind you with the Shartak and the Dragon Ogre, the Shaggoth continues. So that's sort of what that looks like, just to show what ends up happening over a period of time is those Witch Elves with 1 attack each and poison, and 3 attacks each in, or 2 attacks with the additional hand weapons because the Frenzy is beaten out of them at one point. They're able to sustain a lot of damage, and even through the poison, on one turn, the Shaggoth does take 3 wounds, even though fortunately over time, I'm able to beat that unit down. At one point on the left, you can see, and this was also clever by John, that I would have liked to have restrained and reformed. I felt like, wow, I'm going to win here. Maybe I'll go back into the back of these Dragon Ogres, but I couldn't pivot without ending up in base contact with his Dark Rider. So even though they're 1 inch away, the base size of my Shaggoth and Dragon Ogre is too great to pivot on the spot and be able to stay without base contact. Then underneath that, you can see the spawn and the Cold Ones. The combat is continuing. And over here, the Dragon Ogre is... John had intercepted and put his Dark Riders in the middle to protect his Sorceress. That meant that my Shaman couldn't get a line of sight here because it wasn't the closest target with Viletide, sadly. However, at the same time, the Cold Ones are able to beat the spawn. And I think I continue to make this mistake where I send it in with something else that then allows other units to gain resolution. And even though I only have to give ground, what ends up happening is these Cold Ones get loose. This was on my turn. Spawn charges. I kill one or two, but the Cold Ones win combat by one. I think with a Musician, they're able to restrain and reform, and then they're going to shoot through and hit my other units, which are in a line, which is something I go to great pains to avoid, as you would have seen in the overrun video. Those Cold Ones hit the level 2 Shaman in the front. Admittedly, the Shaman and the Bestigor on top of a chariot are very resilient, and I'm able to kill, I think, 2 of the Cold Ones, leaving with 3 left. In a crazy situation, like one, you sort of expect pivoting away, the Shaman is able to drop through for Vigo. There's leadership 8 here from the Shaman, but I think John needed to roll 6 to collect my general and get started a new combat, and only rolled 5, including Swift Stride. So while there's a lot of unpredictability in Warhammer, and I couldn't have anticipated this turn towards the units from the Cold Ones, incredibly, like if you watch the video with Paddy's Wild Riders versus my Sky Cutter, and an improbable series roll saves me in this game. And what I'm able to then do is the spawn is able on my turn to then get the Sorcerer, which is great. It can't flee from the compulsory movement, random movement. And you can imagine the spawn makes short work of that Sorcerer, does the 2 wounds it needs to do. And over here, the Shaggoth and the Dragon Ogres are going to finish off the Witch Elves, even if the ambushes are going to be there, if they need to be, to finish them off. And you're seeing the dregs of what's left at the end. To the left, the Sorcerer is able to pick off my Shaman. There's a base to base. It connects, and I think it had the summoning or something like that was able to finish it off. And then this picture shows my Wizards taking down the Cold One. So Viletide, fantastic against big, heavy toughness targets or heavily armored targets. In this case, the 3 Cold Ones were wiped out by the combination of magic missiles that reduced armor piercing, or reduced armor values overall. So finally, his Cauldron, after sort of rumbling around all game, not doing much, isn't able... I just charge it to see how I go, and I get creamed by the Witch Elf unit. So you can see by the Ogre Blade, Death Hag striking first makes very, very short work. So I just say, look, what I'm going to do is line everything up so I can do 1 charge, stay out of arc until we're going to hit you with at least all the close orders. And John says, yep, fair enough. I've had enough at that point, and we call it. And so it ends up a bit of a massacre for me, where I think I probably was taking a bit of a harder list than John, Dragon were notwithstanding, but I came away thinking that there is some sort of legs competitively to going all in on Viletide, which I was surprised by. The Chariots are pretty good. I'll be playing something similar at the event on the 27th of December, which I'll have some videos up for later. But I've toned it down a little bit for the scenarios to try to win. I've got a unit of the Gore unit. I didn't really think the ambushes were that great. Maybe I was spoilt for choice in this game. They were able to zone really well, but I've gone to a unit of Gores with a battle standard bearer to try to win some objectives, and I'm running some center Gores, which is mostly for laughs, but they also have a standard bearer. So we'll see how I go. Thanks for watching.